My name is Claudia, and at 32, I finally bought my dream Victorian home after years of saving every penny from my interior design business. My family has always been close-knit, sometimes too close for comfort. Last Sunday's family dinner was supposed to be ordinary until my sister Amanda stood up with an announcement that made my heart stop. "Mom and Dad promised I could live with you while I get back on my feet," she exclaimed with excitement. I took a slow sip of water, feeling all eyes on me before replying. "That's impossible. I sold my house. I'm moving to Chicago in 2 weeks." If you're watching this, let me know where you're from, and hit subscribe if you've ever had to choose between family expectations and your own dreams. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Seattle shaped so much of who I am today. Our home was modest, but warm, with my parents raising three of us kids with strong values about family sticking together. My father worked as an accountant while my mother taught elementary school. They weren't wealthy by any means, but they provided stability and always emphasized how siblings should support each other through thick and thin. As the middle child between my older brother Jack and younger sister Amanda, I often found myself in the peacekeeper role. Jack was always the responsible one, studying diligently and following a predictable path through college into a corporate job. Amanda, being the baby of the family, received different treatment from day one. My parents doted on her, excusing behaviors they never would have tolerated from Jack or me. "Family comes first, Claudia," my father would remind me whenever I expressed frustration over Amanda borrowing my clothes without asking, or when I had to cancel plans to babysit her while my parents worked. "Your sister needs you. One day you might need her too." Even as children, the expectations were clear. When Amanda struggled with math homework, I was expected to tutor her instead of attending my art club meetings. When she needed a ride to the mall while I was studying for finals, guess who had to drop everything? The pattern was established early, but I never imagined it would follow us into adulthood. Despite these family dynamics, I was determined to forge my own path. While Jack followed our father's practical footsteps into finance, and Amanda drifted through high school with no clear direction, I discovered my passion for interior design. My bedroom became my first canvas, transforming it with budget finds from thrift stores and flea markets that impressed even my budget-conscious parents. College wasn't easy for me financially. Unlike Amanda, who received generous parental support despite her mediocre grades, I worked two part-time jobs while studying. Design school demands were intense, requiring expensive materials and countless sleepless nights completing projects. But every exhausting moment was worth it. I graduated with honors and a portfolio that landed me an entry-level position at a small but respected Seattle design firm. The early years of my career taught me resilience. I started with basic tasks, gradually building my reputation through dedication and creative solutions for clients on tight budgets. After 5 years, I had enough regular clients to branch out on my own, specializing in revitalizing historic homes with modern touches while preserving their character. That's when I found it. The house that made my heart skip a beat the moment I drove past. A Victorian beauty built in 1901, sitting slightly neglected on a tree-lined street in Seattle's historic district. The blue-gray paint was peeling, the porch sagged slightly, and the garden had become a wilderness, but I could see past all that. The ornate trim details, bay windows, and the charming turret spoke to me of history and possibility. The listing price made me wince. Even with my growing business success, it seemed out of reach. But something told me this house was meant to be mine. I consulted with a financial advisor, calculated exactly what sacrifices would be necessary, and made an offer slightly below asking price. After a nerve-wracking negotiation, the house became mine. I was 29 and a homeowner of not just any house, but my dream home. The day I received the keys was one of the proudest moments of my life. Standing alone in the empty foyer with its original hardwood floors, I felt a sense of accomplishment that brought tears to my eyes. No one had handed this to me. Every square inch represented years of hard work, careful saving, and purposeful choices. The renovation began immediately. I took my time tackling one room at a time, doing much of the cosmetic work myself. The kitchen received a respectful update with period-appropriate cabinets but modern appliances. The bathroom's clawfoot tub was restored rather than replaced. Every paint color was carefully selected to honor the home's history while reflecting my personal style. My favorite spot became the window seat in the turret room, which I transformed into a reading nook overlooking the garden. That garden too slowly came back to life under my weekend attention, with heritage roses climbing trellises and lavender borders lining the brick pathway to the door. For 3 wonderful years, this house was my sanctuary and my showcase. Clients were impressed by what I had accomplished, and my business thrived, partly because potential customers could see my design philosophy brought to life in my own home. I hosted small dinner parties for friends, holiday gatherings for family, and even a few design workshops for aspiring decorators. My parents expressed pride in what I had accomplished, though they occasionally made comments about the house being too much space for just one person, comments that I chose to ignore. Jack appreciated my achievement, having taken a similar self-made path in his own field. Amanda, however, seemed to view my home more as a convenient crash pad after nights out than as the achievement it represented. Little did I know that my dream home's days were numbered, not because of any structural issue or financial setback, but because of a family expectation I never agreed to fulfill. Amanda has always been beautiful, charming, and completely unprepared for adult responsibility. While Jack and I moved out after college and established our independent lives, Amanda took a different approach to adulthood. My sister is 3 years younger than me, but sometimes the emotional gap feels like decades. At 29, she had already cycled through 7 different jobs, each lasting anywhere from 3 weeks to 8 months. Her resume read like a tour of every retail and food service establishment in the greater Seattle area, with mysterious gaps that she'd explain away with vague references to taking time to find herself or recovering from toxic work environments. The truth, which my parents refused to acknowledge, was that Amanda struggled with basic workplace expectations. Showing up on time proved challenging. Following directions from supervisors was oppressive in her view. Completing assigned tasks without constant validation seemed impossible. Not everyone is cut out for the conventional path, my mother would say defensively whenever I expressed concern about Amanda's employment history. She's creative and free-spirited. Those creative tendencies extended to her financial management as well. Despite earning decent wages during her brief employment stints, Amanda never seemed to have money for rent or utilities. She'd cycle through roommates who eventually tired of covering her share. Credit card debt mounted, with my parents inevitably receiving tearful phone calls about impending disasters if they didn't help. And they always helped. $1,000 here for overdue rent, 500 there for a credit card minimum payment, 2,000 for car repairs on a vehicle she couldn't afford in the first place. Each bailout came with weak promises that this is the last time, and assurances that Amanda was really getting her act together now. I loved my sister. Beneath her irresponsible exterior was a genuinely kind-hearted person who could light up a room with her laughter and make strangers feel like old friends within minutes of meeting her. But loving someone doesn't require enabling behaviors that ultimately hurt them. This was a distinction my parents never seemed to grasp. Family supports family, my father would say firmly, whenever I suggested that perhaps Amanda needed to experience natural consequences. What kind of people would we be if we let your sister become homeless? The worst part was watching Amanda's genuine potential go untapped. She had artistic talent and emotional intelligence that could have translated into a fulfilling career with the right focus and discipline. Instead, those gifts emerged only sporadically between crises. The pattern became predictable over the years. Amanda would secure a new job, apartment, or relationship. There would be a honeymoon period of enthusiastic texts and social media posts about her fresh start. Then would come the subtle complaints, the signs of disillusionment. Finally, the inevitable collapse, followed by another round of parental rescue. 6 months before the fateful Sunday dinner, Amanda's marriage to Tyler imploded after just 2 years. They had rushed into it after dating for only 4 months, with my parents funding an elaborate wedding, despite my private concerns about the relationship's foundation. Tyler was similar to Amanda in many ways: charming, fun-loving, and equally cavalier about financial responsibility. Their apartment became a showcase of impulsive purchases, designer furniture they couldn't afford, the latest electronics, and matching motorcycles that spent more time being repaired than ridden. The details of their breakup emerged in fragments. From what I gathered, Tyler had grown tired of Amanda's spending and job hopping, while she resented his increasing criticism. Ironic, considering they had enabled each other's worst tendencies from the beginning. With the marriage over, Amanda returned to our parents' home dragging suitcases of belongings and an emotional state that required constant attention. My mother temporarily reduced her teaching hours to provide support. My father spent evenings listening to Amanda rehash the relationship's demise rather than pursuing his woodworking hobby in the garage. At first, I did my part too. I invited Amanda for dinner at my house, listening supportively and offering gentle advice about moving forward. But as weeks turned into months with no sign of Amanda taking steps toward independence, my concern deepened. Family gatherings became increasingly tense. Sunday dinners, once a pleasant tradition, now centered around Amanda's emotional state. Conversations were carefully edited to avoid triggering her tears. My occasional updates about work successes were quickly redirected to focus on how such connections might benefit Amanda's nebulous future plans. "Doesn't your client's brother work in marketing?" Amanda's thinking about exploring that field. My mother would interject, despite Amanda showing no previous interest in or aptitude for marketing. Then came the hints, subtle at first, but growing more transparent with each passing week. "Claudia, that guest room of yours is just sitting empty most of the time, isn't it?" my father mentioned during dessert one Sunday. "Your sister really admires the peaceful energy of your neighborhood," my mother observed another time. "She says she sleeps better at your house than anywhere else." Amanda began dropping by my home unannounced more frequently, often staying late into the evening, and making comments about which furniture pieces she'd choose, if this were my room. I deflected these hints, changing subjects or making non-committal responses. Part of me couldn't believe my family would actually expect me to take in my adult sister indefinitely. The other part recognized the gathering storm clouds, but hoped they would dissipate before breaking. Meanwhile, something else was brewing in my life, something exciting and terrifying that would soon force every card onto the table. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning as I was reviewing fabric samples for a client's living room redesign. The sender was Eleanor Winston, creative director at Winston & Myers, one of the most prestigious interior design firms in Chicago. I'd met her briefly at a design conference the previous year and had been impressed by her innovative approach to urban residential spaces. "We've been following your work with historical properties in Seattle," the email began. "Your portfolio shows exactly the blend of respect for architectural integrity and contemporary functionality that our clients are increasingly seeking. We have an opening for a senior designer specializing in historic renovations, and I believe you would be an excellent fit." My hands trembled as I read further. Winston & Myers wasn't just any design firm. Their projects appeared in national magazines. Their client list included wealthy families who owned landmark properties throughout the Midwest. Working there would mean access to resources, artisans, and opportunities I could only dream of in my independent practice. But Chicago. The thought of leaving Seattle, where I'd built my life and business, was daunting. More significantly, leaving my dream home into which I had poured not just money, but pieces of my soul seemed impossible to contemplate. I called my mentor from design school, Professor Winters, who had relocated several times during her distinguished career. "This is the call you've been waiting for, whether you knew it or not," she said after I explained the opportunity. "Your talent has always deserved a bigger stage, Claudia. The question is whether you're ready to step onto it." "But my house," I protested. "You know what that place means to me." "I do," she said gently. And I also know that your greatest gift isn't in owning a beautiful home, but in creating beautiful homes. This opportunity could allow you to do that on a scale you've never imagined. Over the next week, I made lists. In the Stay column, my beloved house established local clients' proximity to family familiar surroundings. In the Go column, career advancement higher profile projects, significantly better compensation, and the chance to work with designers I had admired from afar. The lists helped organize my thoughts, but didn't make the decision clearer. I spent sleepless nights wandering through my home, trailing my fingers along the walnut banister I had carefully restored, standing in the kitchen where every detail reflected my vision, and sitting in my turret reading Nook, watching dawn break over the garden. I spoke with friends who offered perspectives ranging from, "You'd be crazy to leave," to, "You'd be crazy to stay." I consulted a financial advisor who outlined the economic implications of both choices. I even saw a therapist for 2 sessions to explore my emotional attachment to the house versus my professional ambitions. 3 weeks after receiving the initial email, I made my decision. I would accept the position in Chicago. The professional opportunity was simply too significant to decline, and at 32, I was young enough to create another dream home someday. Eleanor was delighted when I called to accept. "We'll need you here by the 1st of next month if possible," she said. "We have 3 major projects starting immediately that would benefit from your expertise." That timeline meant I needed to act quickly. The Seattle real estate market was strong, but selling a home, especially one with historical character, sometimes took months. I contacted Martin, a realtor who specialized in historic properties, and had actually shown me my house originally. "It's a gem, Claudia," he said during his assessment visit. "You've done amazing work here. It should attract significant interest, but finding the right buyer who appreciates these details could take time." "I don't have much time," I explained, outlining my situation. "I need to be in Chicago in less than 2 months." Martin suggested a slightly lower listing price than I had hoped for, but one that might attract serious buyers quickly. "Let's list it next week," he said. "I already have a few clients who have been looking for exactly this type of property." The listing went live on a Thursday. By Saturday afternoon, I had 6 showing requests. By Sunday evening, I had received 3 offers, one of them at full asking price, from a young couple, the Harrises. Emily and David Harris reminded me of myself 3 years earlier. Both architects in their early 30s, they had been searching for a historic home to restore and cherish. During their showing, Emily had teared up when she saw the reading nook, confessing it was exactly like one she had dreamed of since childhood. "We would honor all the work you've done," David assured me earnestly. "This wouldn't be a flip or a dramatic modernization. We see ourselves as stewards of this home's history, just adding our chapter to its story." Their offer came with a letter explaining their vision for the house, which aligned perfectly with my own values. They even asked if I would be willing to share information about the paint colors and sources for some of the restoration materials I had used. I accepted their offer the next day. The timeline would be tight, but feasible, a 30-day escrow period with closing scheduled just 10 days before I needed to be in Chicago. I would need to pack quickly and make arrangements for temporary housing in Chicago until I found a new home there. A strange mix of emotions washed over me as I signed the acceptance papers. Relief that the house would go to people who would love it properly. Excitement about my new position. And a deep, aching sadness about leaving the space I had transformed with such care. Oddly, I kept the sale private from my family. Something told me to wait until arrangements were finalized before sharing the news. Perhaps I sensed the complications that would arise. Or perhaps I simply wanted to process my own complex feelings before dealing with their reactions. The Harrises requested a final walkthrough before closing to ask questions about the home's quirks and maintenance needs. We spent 2 hours going through every room, with me sharing the house's secrets, which radiator needed occasional bleeding, how the west-facing windows required extra weather stripping in winter, the best setting for the garden irrigation system during August heat waves. "We'll take good care of everything," Emily promised as they were leaving. "Maybe someday, if you're back in Seattle, you can visit and see how we've continued your work." I hugged her impulsively, grateful that my beloved home would be in caring hands. The papers were signed. The sale would close in 2 weeks. My dream home would soon belong to someone else, and my new life in Chicago would begin. All that remained was to tell my family. A conversation I had been postponing, knowing it would be difficult, but never imagining just how complicated it would become. Sunday family dinners had been a tradition in our family since before I could remember. Regardless of what was happening in our lives, we gathered at our parents' home at 5 o'clock sharp, bringing side dishes or desserts to complement Mom's main course. This particular Sunday seemed ordinary enough as I parked my car along the curb. Jack's SUV was already there, as was Amanda's small blue sedan. I balanced a homemade apple pie in one hand while retrieving my purse from the passenger seat with the other. The familiar scent of my mother's roast chicken greeted me as I approached the front door. "There she is," my father called out as I entered. He was in his usual spot, settled into his recliner with the sports section of the newspaper. "We were just wondering if you were going to make it." "Sorry I'm a few minutes late," I said, glancing at my watch to see it was only 5:07. Finishing up this pie took longer than I expected. My mother emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. She kissed my cheek, but seemed distracted, her eyes not quite meeting mine. "Perfect timing, sweetie. Jack just opened a bottle of wine." In the dining room, Jack was indeed pouring Cabernet into glasses. He gave me a quick side hug. "Hey, sis, you look tired. Everything okay?" Before I could answer, Amanda bounced in from the kitchen, looking more energized than I had seen her in months. Her hair was freshly highlighted, and she wore a new-looking blouse I didn't recognize. "Claudia, finally!" She hugged me with unusual enthusiasm. "I have so much to tell you today." Something felt off about the entire scene. My mother's nervous energy, my father's overly casual demeanor, Jack's concerned glance, Amanda's barely contained excitement. The air felt charged with unspoken expectations. Dinner began normally enough, with passing dishes and initial small talk about the unusually warm weather for April. My mother had outdone herself with the meal: roast chicken, her famous scalloped potatoes, fresh asparagus, and homemade rolls. Yet she barely touched her food, pushing it around her plate instead. "So, Claudia," my father said after a few minutes, setting down his fork with deliberate care, "how's that big old house of yours doing? Still keeping up with all the maintenance?" "It's fine," I answered cautiously. "No major issues lately." "Those older homes can be such money pits," he continued. "All those rooms to heat, constant repairs. Must get expensive." I nodded non-committally, taking a sip of wine. "It's manageable." My mother jumped in. "And so much space for just one person. How many bedrooms did you say it has again?" "3." I replied, increasingly certain this conversation was heading somewhere specific. "My bedroom, my home office, and the guest room." "That guest room," my father mused, "gets used once or twice a year when friends visit." Jack shot me a puzzled look across the table, clearly sensing the strange undercurrent, but not understanding its purpose any more than I did. "It comes in handy," I said, "and I like having the space." Amanda had been unusually quiet during this exchange, practically vibrating with contained energy as she glanced between our parents. Finally, after an almost imperceptible nod from our mother, she set down her water glass and stood up. "I have an announcement to make," she declared, beaming around the table. "As you all know, things have been really tough since Tyler and I split up, but I've been doing a lot of soul-searching and making plans for a fresh start." My parents nodded encouragingly. Jack raised an eyebrow but remained silent. "I've decided to go back to school," Amanda continued. "There's a wonderful interior design certificate program at the community college. I've always had an eye for decoration, and seeing Claudia's success has really inspired me." I felt a moment of genuine happiness for my sister. This sounded like a positive step, perhaps the first sign of her taking responsibility for her future. "That's great, Amanda," I said sincerely. "I'm happy to share resources or advice if—" But she wasn't finished. Her smile widened as she delivered the real news. "And the best part is, Mom and Dad promised I could live with you while I get back on my feet. With your expertise right there in the house, I'll learn so much more than just from classes. It's perfect timing since the spring quarter starts next month. The dining room fell silent. All eyes turned to me, expectant expressions on my parents' faces, excitement on Amanda's, and shock on Jack's. My mind raced. They had planned this ambush, presenting it as a fait accompli in front of everyone to make it harder for me to refuse. The presumption was breathtaking. Not only had they made this arrangement without consulting me, but they also seemed to expect me to readily agree. I reached for my water glass, buying precious seconds to formulate a response. The cool liquid helped calm the heat rising in my throat. Setting the glass down carefully, I looked directly at Amanda. "That's impossible," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I sold my house. I'm moving to Chicago in 2 weeks." The silence that followed my announcement felt eternal, though it probably lasted only seconds. Amanda's smile froze, then crumpled. My mother gasped audibly, her hand flying to her chest as if physically struck. My father's face darkened with the familiar storm clouds of his disappointment. "What do you mean you sold your house?" my mother finally whispered, her voice trembling. How could you do something so significant without telling us?" "I accepted a position with Winston and Myers Design in Chicago," I explained, setting my napkin beside my plate. "It's an incredible opportunity. The house sale closes in 2 weeks and I start my new job at the beginning of next month." "But your house," my father said, his voice rising. "Your dream house that you've talked about for years. You just sold it without a word to your family." "I made the decision a few weeks ago," I said. "The right buyers came along quickly. I was planning to tell everyone today, actually." Amanda had sunk back into her chair, tears welling in her eyes. "But what about me?" she demanded. "Mom and Dad promised, they said it was all arranged." I turned to look at her directly. "They promised something that wasn't theirs to give Amanda. My house belongs to me, or it did until I signed it over to the new owners. They had no right to offer it to you without even speaking to me first." "We were going to discuss it with you today," my mother insisted, though her averted eyes told a different story. "We just thought, with Amanda's new direction, and you having all that extra space." "So you decided to present it as a done deal?" I asked. "To announce it in front of everyone so I'd feel too guilty to say no." Jack, who had been watching the scene unfold with wide eyes, finally spoke. "Hold up. You all planned for Amanda to move in with Claudia without asking her first. And none of you thought that might be something to, I don't know, check with the actual homeowner about." "Stay out of this, Jack," my father warned. "This is between your sisters." "No, it's not," I countered. "This is about all of you making assumptions about my life and my property. This is about the pattern that's existed since we were children. Amanda needs something, so Claudia should provide it." "That's not fair," my mother protested. "We've always supported all of you equally." "Really?" The dam had broken now, years of carefully contained frustration spilling out. "Did you pay for Jack's college because you didn't pay for mine? I worked 2 jobs and took out loans that I just finished paying off last year. Did Jack have to cancel his plans repeatedly to bail Amanda out of whatever crisis she was having? Did you expect Amanda to tutor me when I struggled with classes?" My father stood up, his face flushed. "You're being ridiculous. Family helps family. Your sister needs help right now, and instead of offering it, you're running off to Chicago without even consulting us." "I'm 32 years old, Dad. I don't need to consult you about my career moves or my property decisions. And Amanda is 29. When exactly is she going to stand on her own feet if we keep creating safety nets for her?" Amanda's tears were flowing freely now. "I can't believe you're being so selfish. I need this, Claudia. What am I supposed to do now?" "The same thing other adults do," I replied, trying to keep my voice level. "Find an apartment you can afford. Get a job to pay for it while you take classes. Make a budget and stick to it." "On what money?" she wailed. "You know I don't have savings. Because every time you get money, you spend it on things you don't need instead of building stability," I pointed out. The universe didn't force you to buy a motorcycle, or designer clothes, or go on weekend trips to Vancouver when you could barely make rent. Jack attempted to intervene again. Maybe we should all take a breath here. Clearly, there's been a misunderstanding, and there's no misunderstanding, my father interrupted. Your sister is abandoning this family when we need her, after everything we've done for her. I laughed incredulously. What exactly have you done for me, Dad, other than expect me to be Amanda's permanent backup plan? My mother began to cry now too, her shoulders shaking. How can you say such things? We gave you life raised, you loved you. And I'm grateful for that, I said, softening slightly. But loving me should mean supporting my dreams too, not just Amanda's. This position in Chicago is an incredible opportunity. I'll be working on historic mansions museum renovations projects that could end up in national magazines. Isn't that worth celebrating, rather than making me feel guilty? You can get design work anywhere, my father dismissed. You don't need to move across the country for that. This isn't just any design work, this is career defining. But you'd understand that if you'd ever asked about my business beyond whether it could somehow benefit Amanda. The conversation continued to spiral, old resentment surfacing from all sides. My mother alternated between tears and guilt-inducing reminiscences about sacrifices she'd made for us children. My father's disappointment hardened into anger, his words becoming increasingly cutting. Amanda sobbed about her uncertain future, making it sound as if her entire life trajectory depended on living in my spare bedroom. Through it all, Jack tried to mediate, looking increasingly uncomfortable as family history was relitigated across the dining table, the abandoned meal growing cold. Finally, I stood up. I think I should go. We're just going in circles, and this isn't productive for anyone. Running away from problems instead of solving them, my father muttered. Very mature. The problem, I said, gathering my purse, is that you all made plans for my property without my consent, and are now angry that I had my own plans for my life. I love you all, but I need some space right now. Jack followed me to the door. I'll call you later, he said quietly. For what it's worth, I think you're right to take the Chicago job. It sounds amazing. I nodded gratefully and headed to my car. The drive home was a blur, my mind replaying snippets of the disastrous dinner conversation. By the time I arrived home, my soon-to-be former home, my phone was already lighting up with messages. From my mother, please call us, we need to talk about solutions. From my father, your behavior tonight was disappointing. Your sister is devastated. From Amanda, I can't believe you're doing this to me, after everything I've been through. Only Jack's message offered support. They'll come around eventually. Stand your ground. Proud of you. I silenced my phone and poured a glass of wine, carrying it to my reading nook in the turret. Sitting there among the cushions, looking out at the garden in the fading evening light, I wondered if I'd done the right thing. Not about taking the job or selling the house, those decisions I was certain about, but about the way I'd finally confronted the family dynamics that had shaped so much of my life. The guilt was powerful, programmed into me through years of family expectations. But alongside it was something new, a sense of liberation, of boundaries finally established, of standing up for my own dreams after years of accommodating everyone else's. The 2 weeks following the Sunday dinner confrontation were some of the most stressful of my life. Preparing for a cross-country move while wrapping up client projects would have been challenging enough without the added complication of family drama. My parents shifted tactics daily. Sometimes they appealed to my emotions with tearful phone calls about family loyalty and Amanda's fragile state. Other times they attempted practical arguments about the logistics and costs of living in Chicago versus staying in Seattle. When those approaches failed, they resorted to guilt and manipulation. After raising you and supporting your dreams, this is how you repay us, my father said during one particularly difficult call. By abandoning your sister when she's finally trying to get her life together. I'm not abandoning anyone, I repeated for what felt like the 100th time. I'm pursuing a career opportunity. Amanda is an adult who needs to make her own choices just like I have. It's so easy for you to say that from your position of privilege, he countered. Not everyone has your advantages. The irony of this statement was stunning, considering I had worked for everything I had while Amanda had received continuous financial support from our parents. But pointing this out only led to circular arguments about different personality types and how some people just need more support. Meanwhile, Amanda launched her own campaign. First came the angry texts accusing me of sabotaging her fresh start. When those didn't work, she switched to heartbreaking messages about how scared she was and how she just needed a few months to get on her feet. Finally, she resorted to recruiting extended family members to pressure me. Aunt Judith called to tell me how disappointed she was in my selfishness. Cousin Mark sent lengthy emails explaining how sisters should support each other. Even my grandmother, usually not one to interfere, phoned to ask if I was really sure about my decision. Jack remained my lone ally, running interference when possible and offering moral support when the pressure became overwhelming. "They're testing your boundaries," he observed during one of our conversations. "They've never had to accept that you might prioritize yourself, and they don't know how to handle it." Through it all, I continued packing my belongings, arranging for movers, and working with a Chicago real estate agent to find temporary housing until I could purchase a new home there. Each box I sealed felt like a small act of reclaiming my independence. My work provided some respite from the family tensions. My clients were universally supportive of my new opportunity, though sad to lose me as their designer. I spent long hours ensuring smooth handoffs to colleagues for ongoing projects and creating detailed documentation for the new homeowners about the restoration choices I'd made in my house. 10 days before my planned departure, my concentration was broken by a forceful knocking at my front door. Opening it revealed Amanda standing on my porch, red-eyed but determined, with two large suitcases beside her. "What are you doing?" I asked, blocking the doorway. "Moving in," she said, attempting to push past me. "We can figure out the Chicago thing together. Maybe I'll come with you until you realize this is a mistake." I stood firm. "Amanda, no. The house is sold. The new owners take possession next week. You cannot stay here." "Just until then," she pleaded. "I got in a huge fight with Mom and Dad. I can't go back there right now." Despite my determination to maintain boundaries, the sight of my sister in genuine distress tugged at my heart. "You can come in and we can talk," I conceded. "But you're not moving in. Not even temporarily." She left the suitcases on the porch and followed me inside, her eyes widening as she took in the stacked boxes and partially dismantled furniture. The reality of my impending move seemed to hit her fully for the first time. "You're really going through with this," she said quietly, sinking onto a couch that was now stripped of its decorative pillows. "Yes, I am," I confirmed, sitting across from her. "I signed a contract with Winston and Myers. The house sale closes in a week. This isn't a negotiable situation, Amanda." She stared at her hands for a long moment before speaking again. "I don't know what to do, Claudia. I really thought this was going to work out. Living here, learning from you, finally getting my life on track." Something in her voice, a genuine vulnerability, rather than the manipulative tone I'd grown accustomed to, made me respond more gently than I had in recent weeks. "Tell me honestly," I said. "Was going back to school for interior design really your plan? Or was it just a way to justify moving in with me?" She flushed, confirming my suspicion. "I do think I'd be good at it," she defended weakly. "I've always had an eye for color and arrangement." "Having good taste isn't the same as building a career," I explained. "Design school is intensely demanding. The business side requires organization, client management, budgeting, all things you've struggled with." Tears welled in her eyes again. "So you think I'm hopeless, that I'll never amount to anything?" "That's not what I said." I moved to sit beside her, taking her hand. "I think you have many talents and capabilities. But I also think you need to find your own path, not try to copy mine because it looks convenient or because Mom and Dad think it's a good idea." "But what am I supposed to do now?" she asked, sounding genuinely lost. "What do you want to do, Amanda?" "Not what do Mom and Dad want, or what seems easiest, or what might get you out of your current situation. What actually interests you enough to commit to it." She was silent for a long time, perhaps the first time I'd seen her genuinely reflect rather than react. I've always loved working with kids, she finally said. When I volunteered at the Children's Hospital during that community service requirement after my DUI, it was the only job I've ever had where I didn't watch the clock. This was news to me. I didn't know you felt that way about it. I never told anyone, she admitted. Mom and Dad thought something medical adjacent would be settling. They kept talking about how smart I am and how I should aim higher. The irony wasn't lost on me, our parents pushing Amanda toward more prestigious careers, while simultaneously enabling her dependency. Perhaps their vision of her potential had actually undermined her finding a sustainable path. There are many ways to work with children, I suggested. Teaching childcare, pediatric healthcare support, social services. I wouldn't know where to start, she said. And anyway, I can't afford education for something like that. I really don't have any savings, Claudia. That wasn't an exaggeration. Start small, I advised. Look into certificate programs, entry-level positions that provide training, volunteer opportunities that might lead to jobs. Not everything requires an expensive 4-year degree. Our conversation continued for hours, gradually shifting from Amanda's immediate housing crisis to deeper questions about her aspirations and the patterns that had kept her stuck. For perhaps the first time in our adult lives, we spoke as equals rather than as the responsible sister and the perpetual family project. I've enabled you too, I admitted, by always being the backup plan, by never really insisting you figure things out for yourself. I've taken advantage of that, she acknowledged with surprising self-awareness. It was easier to let you and Mom and Dad solve my problems than to face them myself. By the time she left, returning to our parents' house for the time being, the suitcases still packed, but with a different purpose. Now something had shifted between us. No magical solutions had been found. Amanda still needed to find housing and direction, and I was still moving to Chicago. But a new honesty had entered our relationship, a first step toward a healthier dynamic that might eventually benefit us both. The next day, I received an unexpected text from Amanda. Looking into certification programs for childcare workers. Also found a room for rent near the community college. Thanks for yesterday. It was a small step, but perhaps the beginning of real change. The final days in my dream home passed in a bittersweet blur. Each room held memories of transformation. The kitchen where I'd spent weekends carefully restoring cabinet fronts while listening to jazz. The living room where friends had gathered for my housewarming party. The garden where I'd planted heirloom roses that were just beginning to establish themselves. Letting go was painful but necessary. I reminded myself that homes, even beloved ones, were ultimately just structures. What mattered were the skills I'd developed, the confidence I'd gained, and the new opportunities awaiting me. The morning of closing day, I walked through each room one last time, saying a private goodbye. In the turret reading nook, I left a small gift for Emily Harris, a journal with a handwritten note encouraging her to document her own journey with the house. At the title company's office, meeting with the Harrises to sign the final papers felt surprisingly uplifting. Their excitement mirrored what mine had been 3 years earlier. They asked thoughtful questions about the home's history and shared preliminary ideas for the few changes they planned to make. "We'll be adding a nursery," Emily confided with a shy smile, her hand drifting briefly to her stomach. "We just found out last week." "The third bedroom gets beautiful morning light," I told her. "It would make a perfect nursery." As I handed over the keys, David asked, "Will you stay in touch? We'd love to send you photos as we make our mark on the place." "I'd like that," I said sincerely, exchanging email addresses before we parted ways. Walking to my car afterward, keys no longer on my ring, I felt a curious lightness alongside the sadness. One chapter was ending, but another was beginning. The house had served its purpose in my life, proving I could achieve something significant through my own efforts, showcasing my design philosophy, and ultimately funding my next adventure. My parents had requested a family dinner before my departure for Chicago, a final attempt at reconciliation. I agreed with some trepidation, unsure whether it would provide closure or just reopen wounds that had barely begun to heal. I arrived at their home to find an atmosphere markedly different from our last gathering. My mother had prepared all my favorite foods. My father greeted me with a tentative hug rather than pointed questions. Jack was there with his wife Lisa, providing a buffer and additional perspective. And Amanda surprisingly seemed calmer and more settled than she had in months. I signed a 6-month lease yesterday, she told me quietly, as we helped bring dishes to the table. It's just a room in a shared house, but it's clean, and the roommates seem nice. One of them works at the community college and told me about an administrative assistant position opening up in the continuing education department. That's great, Amanda, I said, genuinely pleased. Really great. Dinner conversation remained carefully civil, touching on neutral topics like an upcoming family wedding and Jack's recent promotion. It wasn't until dessert that my father cleared his throat and addressed the elephant in the room. Claudia, your mother and I have been doing some thinking. He began, uncharacteristic uncertainty in his voice. We may have overstepped with our expectations about your house and Amanda's situation. My mother nodded. We should have talked to you directly instead of making assumptions. It wasn't fair to put you in that position. Though their words stopped short of a full apology, they represented a significant shift from their previous stance. I accepted the olive branch for what it was. I'm excited about Chicago, I told them. Nervous too, but mostly excited. Winston and Myers is giving me the chance to work on historically significant properties that will challenge everything I know about design. I hope you can be happy for me, even if it means I'll be further away. We are proud of you, my mother said with what seemed like genuine emotion. We may not always understand your choices, but we can see how hard you've worked. Jack raised his glass. To Claudia and new beginnings in Chicago. Everyone joined the toast, even Amanda, who added, and to finding our own paths, with a meaningful glance at me. After dinner, as I prepared to leave, Amanda walked me to my car. Jack talked to them, she confided. A lot. He made them see how they've been treating us differently all these years. It started some difficult conversations. Good, I said. Those conversations needed to happen. I'm sorry I tried to make my problems your responsibility, she said. I was scared, but that wasn't fair to you. We'll always be sisters, I told her, hugging her tightly. That doesn't mean living together or following the same path. It means supporting each other and finding our own ways forward. The next morning, I loaded the last of my belongings into my car and began the drive east toward Chicago. The familiar Seattle skyline receded in my rearview mirror, a metaphor too perfect to ignore. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also possibility. A new city, new professional challenges, perhaps eventually, a new home to love. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, the years of hard work and sacrifice, the dream home that had been both achievement and stepping stone, the family patterns I had finally found the courage to challenge. Loving my family didn't mean sacrificing my dreams for theirs. Supporting my sister didn't require solving all her problems. Setting boundaries wasn't selfish, it was necessary for all of us to grow. The road stretched before me, carrying me toward a future I had chosen for myself. There would be obstacles and doubts ahead, certainly. New challenges to navigate, and new skills to master. But for perhaps the first time in my life, I was moving forward without the weight of unreasonable expectations holding me back. Freedom, I realized, wasn't about escaping responsibility. It was about claiming the right to determine which responsibilities were truly mine to carry. My sister's life journey belonged to her, just as mine belonged to me. We could support each other without becoming entangled in unhealthy ways. As I crossed the state line, my phone pinged with a message from Amanda. Started researching early childhood education programs today. Thanks for believing I can do more than just follow someone else's path. I smiled, feeling hopeful for both of us. The road ahead was long, but I was ready for the journey. What about you? Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your own dreams? Have you had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Your support helps me continue sharing these personal journeys. Thank you for being here, And remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for others is to honor your own path.